Hey there, I am super excited. Today I have a new success interview for you from my Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. If you have followed me for any length of time, you know I regularly get the opportunity to interview the top of the top high achievers, best-selling authors, business owners, celebrities, professional athletes, and more. And it's really a privilege. And today was no different. I had the privilege of interviewing Ronny Leber.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Ronny has carved out his own dream life as a keynote speaker. He speaks to sports audiences, he speaks to companies, he's spoken to groups of 5, but also spoken to groups of over 100,000 people. And let me tell you, he has some cool experiences and things that will inspire you to unleash your greatness within. We talk about mindset, and he shares some really cool stories. He's also a life coach where he'll provide coaching to help you get to that next level. Now, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, hey, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so that you're the first to be notified when I come out with a new motivational message or success interview like this one. And if you downloaded the podcast from Apple Podcasts or one of the other podcast platforms, hey, I invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. It's gonna be inspirational. Ronny, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thank you very much, TJ. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today.
It's great to have you on the show. I'm glad that our teams hooked up together and figured this out. You know, you're in Austria, is that right?
Yes, Vienna, Austria, to me, the most beautiful city in the world. It's magical.
I agree that it's magical. I've been there a few times. I had a couple speaking engagements out in that area. Hungary. I remember driving from Budapest to Austria. So when I was a young boy, I was an army brat. So my dad was in the army and we traveled every 3 years, right? So when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old, we lived in Heidelberg, Germany. And so I got the speaking engagement where the company was going to pay for me first class to go to Budapest to speak. And I called the company and I said, listen, would you be willing to, instead of paying me first class to fly, I'm happy to fly coach if I can bring 2 of my brothers on the trip with me and you pay for their travel over as well. And then we could kind of tour Europe a little bit. And so they did it. I did my speech in Budapest. We got a rental car. I remember it was a white Mercedes. And we drove that Mercedes after the speaking engagement up through Vienna, Austria. And we stayed the night there. And I remember at one point when we were driving through, we got pulled over by the police. And I was just like, I was just wondering, why are we getting pulled over? We didn't speed or anything. And I didn't think about it then until we drove into Germany. And a few miles into Germany, we got pulled over again. And I was like, why? So I finally asked the police officer, why are we getting pulled over? And he said, because your badge or sticker on the back of the car had the Hungary sticker. So we were wondering why you were traveling. And I had never experienced that before. But here's what I remember about Austria. The people were great. It was beautiful. We went to and I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, so correct me, please, Ronny, the Neuschwanstein Castle.
Oh, castle, yes. Which is actually the role model for the Disney castle.
It is. They use that as the example to build that. And yes. I've been through that castle twice, and I love the culture over there, and the people are great. So anyway, it's great to have you on the show, man.
Thank you. And it's an old country as well. I mean, look, the US is going to celebrate in 6 years the 250th birthday. Austria has just in 1996, we had our 1000th birthday.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, that's some history right there. Okay, Ronny, let's jump into it. Tell the audience a little bit about your background. Give us the story.
Wow. Well, I graduated, of course, from school, and I was in high school also in Maine in the US for 1 year as an exchange student. That was a lot of fun and very cold. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, like Indian summer and so on. The fall, amazing.
Oh yeah.
In the winter, it's a lot of white and, and quite cold. But yeah, anyway, after I got done, I went to the military, which is here a military service, which is obligatory for a year.
For 1 year? Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then I studied economics, I studied sports, and I also worked part-time in sales and later on actually in teaching people, also on sales and so on. But I never really figured out what I really want to do until I got done with my university. Mm-hmm. So in 2008, when I got done, I was asking myself, well, okay, great. Now actually the playtime is over.
Yeah.
What do you want to do now?
Yeah.
And I thought, because I had done quite some things in the past and I got some level of experience, but not really like nowhere an expert. And I knew that whatever you want to do in your life, you need to be an expert in something because you're not going to get paid for just being a little bit of good there and some good there and some good there. So you need to be really good at something. So what do I want to be good or great in? Because it's unleash your greatness within. So I thought, hey, I want to be great in something that I'm passionate about.
Yes.
Like, I want this to be fun, not just something that I'm interested about, but something that where is a fire burning inside of me, where I feel like, wow, this is it. Mm-hmm. Well, great concept.
Yeah.
The only problem about that was, what is it?
Yep.
Like, what is it that I'm passionate about? Because I was interested in many things. But what is it really that I would do for free, that I would go on and do and that I just love to do, even when the learning curve is gone, when it's not about the money and so on. So I thought, okay, I need to figure that out. So what I was doing is I actually asked myself the same questions over and over again, like, what do I love to do in my free time? What is it that I spend money on? What do I talk with friends about? What did I already love to do as a kid? What fascinates me? What moves me emotionally? And after having asked myself that for weeks and months, I always got the same answer, which was already as a kid, I was fascinated by events that bring the whole world together, like Olympic Games or Soccer World Cup, where you have that feeling like the whole world turns around this right now. Or when you're at a concert, and I guess that probably most of the listeners have been to a concert at some point, or many of them probably. You're not thinking about the time. You're not thinking about, oh, I need to go to the hairdresser tomorrow, or I need to send a text message or something. You're just there. You're present.
Right.
And I thought, I have no idea what I want to do, but I know in that environment I want to be. I want to be in an environment like that. And I came up with some possibilities what it could be. Mm-hmm. It was not what it ended up to be. And then actually, at the same time, one of our local professional sports teams in soccer, they were looking for somebody for a stadium announcer for their youth teams, like the under 17, under 19, for once a month for some milk money on the weekend. Like really, I remember I got 70 euros, which like let's say about $70, yeah, for one game, which was basically nothing. The coolest thing was to be invited to the Christmas party and to get free tickets for the games of the big guys. Yeah,
right.
That was like,
exactly.
Yeah, that was my thing. I just enjoyed it. And 1 year later, actually, I got an opportunity to be the stadium announcer for our professional ice hockey team in Vienna. And that was in 2009. It was the first time that I actually thought, hey, this could be a career. I enjoy that. This is fantastic. And so basically in the beginning, there was just a dream. There was this, I want to go in this direction. I basically the first year, everything I earned from the ice hockey, which was not too much, went one-on-one into a speaker's education, like a voice education, where I could like to train my voice, to add some more assets to myself. And then actually was the dream, and many in the beginning empty miles, where you have like meetings with people, like because I didn't know anyone in the beginning, and nobody knew me. So it was all about like creating this environment, creating this network of people like, hey, there is somebody, and I would love to do that. I have a dream. And then suddenly things started to roll. And then the Austrian national team of soccer and the Austrian Cup final in soccer, I did that. Or I did the American Football Championships in 2011 as a stadium announcer. I do also the ATP tennis tournament in Vienna since 2014, the Vienna City Marathon, boxing as a ring announcer. But all that didn't start in the beginning. And then around in 2014, 15, I pivoted also into business events, doing a lot of business events now for Samsung, for Coca-Cola, for T-Mobile, for Mercedes-Benz, for like really also some really awesome, cool brands, or Swatch, the watches. And and also then some keynote speeches came along. And so this is basically how everything evolved. And I love it.
I can tell that you love it. You've got passion. Okay, so 2 things I wrote down because I think you gave some strategies that maybe you didn't mean to give, but I want to point it out to the audience.
Sure.
Early on, you made the decision, in order to make a living at something that you love, you have to master your craft. And so you said, I started to reflect on my life in times where I enjoyed myself, or were the types of things I would talk to my friends about. And you went through a myriad of different things that you saw a pattern of what you found interest in. And through that, it put you on a path. So I just want to point out to the audience, I love that, because that's the point, is you have to try a number of different things on one hand, but you also have to reflect on what brings you satisfaction in the past, because somewhere in that is the answer on what you need to be doing. Because I'll tell you what, Ronny, after doing this for so many years, speaking and traveling and so forth, I get 40, 50, 60-year-olds that come up to me after every speech and say, I'm 55 years old and I still don't know what I want to do. And that it breaks my heart, because I think life should be finding what those gifts and talents and potentials and intelligences are, and then execute them in a way that you're able to draw upon those gifts on a regular basis. And I think a lot of fulfillment will come to that. But the difficult part is, how do you create a strategy to actually make money at it? And that's what you did next by mastering your craft. One step at a time. Yes.
And I would like to add 2 wisdoms actually that also apply very much to the current situation.
Perfect.
Because in 2008, as many people right now don't even remember out of the top of their heads, but that was the last time we had something like right now happening, where the economy collapsed. And that was pretty much the worst time to actually hit the market as somebody who wants to work as an employee somewhere. So I also applied for some, let's say, normal jobs, but I didn't get anywhere. And so I also thought, okay, but there's also an opportunity in that. There are chances in this right now, because you need to think outside the box.
Yes.
If I wouldn't have had this, that I needed to, that it was a must for me to think outside of the box, I maybe never would have gotten to where I got today. That was one thing. And also, even a step back, when I started to think about what I'm passionate about, I thought I completely took out the money part out of the equation. I did not think about where can I earn money, not initially. First, I just thought, what am I passionate about? What is it that really juices me up? Because I thought, hey, if I'm really good at something, if I'm great at something,
the money will come. That's right.
At something, or the best in the world, I'm going to figure out a way to monetize that.
Correct. 100%.
And this is something that I believe that many people that I talk to, and I'm sure you have a similar experience, that are like, oh, I would love to do that. I would, but I don't know how. Or first of all, if your why is strong enough, you will figure out a how. And second of all, you don't need to go all in from the beginning. If you already have a stable job, you can just build something on the side and maybe cut some time of this job where you're not really passionate about, and just spend it like invested into a project of yours that really could go somewhere and that you're passionate about.
Love that, Ronnie. That's true. When the why is big enough, the how will come. The key is you don't need to know how you're going to do it initially. You just need to get started. Because here's what I write about, and if you think you can, is that you can't even ask the right questions until you start taking the steps. And that's going to require you to take the steps into the unknown before you can even ask the right question that will bring the answers that you need to move forward.
Because you don't know the questions at that time, because you don't have the expertise to know them. And that is okay.
Yes.
Because, I mean, seriously, if I would have known all of the steps that are in front of me, I would be like totally overwhelmed and probably never got started.
You know what? If you had all the steps in front of you, that's true. You either be overwhelmed or you would do what I often say is the easier it is to be good, the more difficult it is to be great, right? It's easy to coast when things come easy to us. But high achievers, even though maybe talent and gifts come easy to them, they still practice outside of practice, right? They go that extra mile. I love that. Those are.
And TJ, I'm going to add something to that. I'm going to put something on top of that. I believe being good is the enemy of being great.
Sure is. Sure is. Good gets in the way.
Because if you settle down for good, you're never going to get great.
Oh, love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. What are some of your experiences? Because I know that you're doing all kinds of speeches, broadcasting, so forth. Give us some of your stories or experiences around meeting with some of these highly professional people, whether they're politicians, whether they're athletes or what have you.
Well, and I'm blessed actually to be in a work environment with many, let's say, celebrities, high profile people, Olympic champions, or top politicians, CEOs, or, for example, one very humble meeting that I had last summer was with Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner. She's a woman from Austria. Mm-hmm. And she is the first woman in the world that was on all 18 summits above 8,000 meters without additional oxygen. Yeah, like Mount Everest, K2, like all of them. No, 14. It's 14 summits that are above 8,000 meters. And her stories were just incredible. Like, you learn so much from those people when, like, oftentimes when you hear that oftentimes death is like walking right next to her, or that one of her climbing partners fell down 1,000 meters, like 3,000 feet into nothing, and so on. And then you still come back the next year and try it again, and so on. Like, it's just like this willingness to not give up, this hunger that all of them combine. And another thing is that actually, what I can see whenever you talk with those people, for many people, and obviously, I mean, for example, I grew up idolizing, of course, sports stars and so on, and like many kids do, like, oh yeah, amazing. And now at the ATP tennis tournament in Vienna, I actually host a talk show with a former world #1 in tennis, who was one of my childhood idols. He was amazing. He was such a fighter, and I was inspired by that. And the beautiful thing is that those are all human people, like all human beings. They are just as human as you and me. They've just mastered a craft where they were really great at, really, really great. But besides that, they also have some other fears, some anxieties, some. They are not immaculate. So there are things always that are that everybody has to carry with them. And I believe that many of us forget about that when we see them and admire them. And I still admire their greatness for what they did, because I love that to this day. I love to see, for example, Olympics. I love to see great stories, great comebacks. And I mean, I got a story about that. If you want to go into that now.
Let me just say, because I want you to talk about Eliud Kipchoge. But let me just say, yeah. So I say, thank you. So, man. Okay, so we'll go there after this. I just want to put a shout out to all my podcast guests. I wish the listeners could see and hear the conversations that we have before we start the show or after we end the show, I'm with you. Every one of these high profile guests like yourself, every one of them is just classy, nice, good, respectful. And I just sometimes wonder if people on the outside see them that way. But and my experiences with working with them many times after the podcast, we do things together. And I just think that you're right. They are just as human as anyone else is. And they're
But you know what?
Yes.
There's one thing that they all have in common. They all have a positive mindset.
For sure.
They all believe.
That's
and
right.
This is something that actually really makes a difference between those who make it and those who don't.
Yes.
The mindset, the focus, the really 100% focus on your thing and to believe that you can do it.
Very good.
Wait, you want me to talk about Eliud Kipchoge?
Yes, please do.
And this is amazing.
Okay.
And
all right, here we
probably not many listeners have heard the name Eliud Kipchoge.
Okay.
Although, are you familiar with Roger Bannister?
Oh, totally. Yeah, wrote about it. Yeah.
Eliud Kipchoge is our day and age Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister, for those who have not heard about him, was the first person who broke the 4-minute mile. And that was 66 years ago. Last year, on the 12th of October, 2019, Eliud Kipchoge was the first person, the first human being on this planet that ran a full marathon, 26.2 miles, 42.195 kilometers in less than 2 hours. In less than 2 hours.
Never been done before.
Never ever. This is like the last big like sound barrier that has been there, like but as it was with Roger Bannister for centuries. People have tried to run a mile under 4 minutes.
Right.
And it seemed impossible. It's not, a human cannot possibly do that.
Right.
And to run a marathon in less than 2 hours, this is unheard of. And this is, and you know, here's the thing, the whole event was just about, it was in Vienna actually, and it was all about him breaking that barrier. It was called the Ineos 159 Challenge. Okay. And the motto of the thing was, no human is limited. So the motto of the race.
Love that.
And he said that the only limitations that we set ourselves are in our mind. And basically, what is interesting about that, in 2017, he already tried to break the 2 hour in Breaking 2, it was called back then, in Monza at a Formula One Grand Prix track, where he was running, and also it was basically kind of similar setup. Mm-hmm. And at that time, his personal best was 2 hours and 4 minutes. And then he went there and he could not do it. And he said that he did not really believe that it was possible.
Oh, he said that? Really?
Yes, he was not there in his mind. He could not feel it. He could not he thought, yeah, maybe, but it was not really clear to him. But this time, he was convinced. He was totally, absolutely committed. But not just him, everybody on this team was committed for this mission. This was like the landing on the moon. This was like, hey, the whole team, you know, that cost about $20 million to set this whole project up. It was huge. You have to imagine, in Vienna, we have like a 3 mile long straight, which is about, there is hardly any elevation. So it was the perfect track. They choose October because of the weather. They were setting up 7 different weather stations. They asphalted the whole thing, completely new. The whole track was newly asphalted. They built a steep curve around one of the turning points so that he could save about 13 seconds. Then they had pacemaker cars up front that had cruise control speedometers, but they had special speedometers built in where you could exactly tune, like they were a lot more exact than the normal ones that you have in a car. Then they had laser pointers on top that were portraying lasers on the ground while the car was driving, where there were the exact spots of the pacemakers, so that the pacemakers knew exactly where they needed to be.
Right.
Like there were 5 pacemakers in front of him. Then he was there. It was like an inverse V. Then he was behind the one in the middle, and then there were 2 behind him. So he was like in a bubble. Then, for example, it was fall in Vienna. They sprayed, and there's this street is full with trees, right and left. They sprayed the trees so that the leaves would not fall to the ground. Like they did pretty much everything that you can do in order to set that. And also, for me, it was just about a year ago that they announced that it was going to be in Vienna. And since I already hosted the Vienna City Marathon, I took contact with the team and I said, hey, if you need me, I would love to be there. I ran a marathon twice, and I would love to be there because I think it's great. And so I actually got to host the finish line, which was for me amazing to be there and to be part of this energy. And we had no idea how many people would show up because, first of all, there was no Austrian participant. There was also, at the same time, in a stadium, you sell so and so many tickets already up front, and okay, it's going to be sold out. It's going to be so and so many people coming. But this, you had no idea because there were no tickets to be sold. So we were just guessing. And I remember the start was at 8:15 in the morning. I arrived at 6:30. And already at the finish line, it was already full. I thought, okay, we're not going to be alone. Thank God. That's going to be great. And then I could see, from my point, I could see like from the metro station, the street, and people were streaming in. And I was like, wow, what is going on? This is so cool. And basically 120,000 people showed up just to see one man run. And you know why? Because they knew that this was greatness. This was history in the making. And they showed up because they wanted to witness history. Like, I mean, seriously, if you would have had a chance to go and see Roger Bannister run the 4-minute mile, would you have gone?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Absolutely. And this was it. This was amazing. And I still get goosebumps when I think about it. And I'm so blessed that I got to be that I was part of this event.
Totally. Isn't it true that we are attracted to greatness? And not everybody can run that fast. I mean, what's interesting about what you said about this gentleman is they had all the lasers set up and everything. That was similar to what Roger Bannister had, although they just had a stopwatch, right? And then he would, right, kind of a thing. But greatness does attract people. And what I mean for anyone out there that maybe, I mean, it's not about running, it's not about writing books, it's not about speaking and so forth. What is your individual greatness? And if you'll go develop it and unleash it and be willing to share it, right? A lot of people have greatness within. They're not even willing to share because of fear or because of something else. If you're willing to share it, people will show up to watch. And I love that story. Let me just say one other thing about greatness. I believe there's 2 types of greatness. Ronny, I believe that there's primary greatness and there's secondary greatness. Now I'm going to go a little esoteric on everybody right now.
I love it.
Primary greatness is, and this is going to go different than what most people probably think, but this is TJ speaking. Primary greatness has to do with the type of mother you are, the type of father you are, the type of friend you are, the type of leader you are. Secondary greatness are the things that were recognized in the world. They're both great, but sometimes we get that out of balance a little bit. So I always want to remind my audience that just because you're not that person or that person, that doesn't mean you don't have greatness within. Just be the best person you can be in competition with your own best self. Any thoughts on that?
I think that is beautiful because I think it's all about being the best version of yourself that you can be. It's not about being the second somebody else. or the second version of like the second version of TJ, the second version of whoever your role model is. It's great to have role models.
That's right. It is.
The beautiful thing about that is that you can stand on the shoulders of giants.
Love it.
You do not need to reinvent the wheel. You can have a look at what did they do? What made them great? And how can I take things from those people that I admire and incorporate that into my system, make it my own, and not to be them, but to be the best at what I can be. I mean, look at the best people in their fields, wherever they are. They did not invent it. They were all they were all people that learned from other people that they admired when they were young, or even still admire. I mean, look at Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Tom Brady is still, when he's talking even about the young guys, he still admires things about them. There's so many things where he's learning. He's turning 43 this summer.
I know.
And he's still playing, and he's still he's learning from the 25-year-old Patrick Mahomes or something.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And like just this mindset of going out there every day, or I'm sure you watched The Last Dance. I'm pretty sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't it an amazing documentary on Netflix?
Yeah.
I love to see this mindset. Michael Jordan, for me, is the ultimate athlete ever.
Michael Jordan was an amazing high achiever. And I think one of the reasons he did, and you'll see it, and you've already mentioned it, with a lot of high achievers, is that high achievers just have hunger. So no matter where you're at and what you're working on or wherever your job is, don't get comfortable. Have the hunger and the ambition to continue to grow. One thing I see is I wonder if people have lost the spirit of ambition. But when you look at people that are excelling, they didn't wait for things to be handed to them, right? That comes from a victim mindset. No.
Yeah.
On their own, they went deep within and they worked, they mastered their craft. They were working out when everybody else was relaxing, as Tony Robbins would say, right? They were still out there hustling. And by the way, you used to work with Tony Robbins, right?
I still do, actually. Before I come to that, I want to say something about what you just said.
Okay.
Because yes, hunger is also another word of finding your why.
Yes.
And last summer also had another talk with an Olympic champion in skiing. Austria is famous for skiing. And he was a double Olympic champion. He won the overall World Cup and so on, and many successes that he had. And he told me, look, in the summertime is when you build your greatness for the winter. If you want to become an Olympic champion, if you want to win the races in the winter, you need to do the things that nobody sees in the summer. He said, nobody's going to look at you. If you run up the mountain 20 times, 30 times, however often it is, nobody's going to say afterwards, oh, you didn't do it or something. But you know it.
That's right.
And a half a year later, everybody else will know it if you did or not.
Love that.
So it's about really finding your hunger, finding your why, finding the drive inside of you.
And then using that why, that vision, to discipline yourself, to do the work in the summer so that you're prepared for the winter. And, you know, Jim Rohn, I don't know if you recognize that name. Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins. Okay, he was Tony Robbins' first mentor, right? Yeah. And Jim Rohn was the business philosopher, and he would always relate it to ants. He says, have you ever seen ants? He says I'm going back 25 years on this, but he would say, ants are busy working to build their homes and mounds and so forth in the summer months so that they're prepared and safe during the winter months. And so Jim Rohn would always say, you have to take advantage of the summers. And no matter where you're at, in those summer, I would say right now, where much of the world is quarantined, if you will, how are you here's my thought. And I would think that some people are struggling with the quarantine and from a mental health standpoint. Here's my thought. Find your why and begin retooling yourself. Begin thinking about how you can execute that goal right now from your home. Start looking for the resources around you. Maybe the the best resource you have is the ability to use the internet and do videos like this and then speak to the world in a new way. All right, instead of just sitting on your couch, create a community, do something that's be actively engaged in a good cause, a good vision for yourself, instead of waiting till things get back to normal. Because here's the reality. Things may not get back to normal as it used to be, right? Okay.
And besides that, TJ, be okay to fail.
I love it. Yes.
Be okay to fail, because if you are not willing to fail, or if you're only willing to fail small, you're never going to win big. Never.
That's
and
good.
Another thing, it's what I would say in the stage life, it's what you do in the dark that will make you shine in the light. Because all the practice and everybody who is great put a lot of practice, a lot of effort in his craft. Nobody's going to watch you do that. It's not like, wow, you practiced. Oh, amazing. Oh, you practiced. Oh my God.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody's going to come up to you and say that.
Hey, Ronny,
you're
right. Ronny, so I got to tell you a little family story. So I took 3 years, several years ago, for the American football seasons. And when my boys were in middle school, they didn't have a coach for the middle school. So I went over the first few days when he entered middle school, and I went over to watch him during football practice. And all the younger boys in the middle school were practicing up with the high schoolers. I thought, that's kind of weird. That's kind of dangerous. Well, for 3 days, I brought my chair and I would sit on the field. Finally, the head coach of the high school team came over to me and said, hey, Mr. Hoisington, we don't have any coaches for the middle school team, but we should have a coach for the middle school team. Do you have any time that you could maybe do it? And I thought, sure, I would love to. And then I had to figure out how I could do it with my business and so forth. But I decided to make that sacrifice. And it led me to have to go, because it had been many years since I had played football and so forth. I had to go to YouTube and study the drills and so forth.
What did you play? What position?
I was a linebacker and a running back. So 1 year I'd played quarterback, but I coached them. And
did you know that Tom Brady was in the beginning a linebacker?
Was he really?
In his first year, he was the backup quarterback, and he also was a linebacker.
I didn't know that. Okay. So for me, it was just fun when I was a boy, but then I quit to start my first company when I was 16 years old. Anyway, that's a whole separate story. So here I am, my boys are in middle school and they want to play football. And so I said, okay. And then I ended up becoming the coach. The one thing that I gave those boys, and if any of them are listening to this podcast, they would all second this. I was not the best coach in terms of skill and calling plays. That was not me. All right. That's never been here's what I gave those boys is mindset. I got them to think about failure a certain way, because we lost a lot of games because on the first year I coached, we only had 12 players, which means during practice, we had to practice against air. So there wasn't really good practices and so forth. And, but they came out of that knowing how to think like a winner. My son, Bryce, was a little scrawny boy, but then by the time he got to 9th grade, I was no longer coaching him. The muscles started to come in. And by his sophomore year, he came to me and he said, Dad, I want to be a running back, and I want to break all the Washington State in America, the Washington State running back records in 11-man football. I go, okay, you know what it's going to require, Bryce? I've taught you all these years, because over the dinner table, we talk about high performance principles and so forth.
Beautiful.
I said, listen, here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to, because you're smaller than the average person. I said, you're going to have to out practice everybody else. That's the only, you have to think about what assets do you have that will outweigh other people. And one of those is discipline. One of those is hunger. Well, he ended up running really well his sophomore year. And he started to practice. So going into his junior year, all through the summer when there was no practice, he would take the sled home from the school. They actually let us borrow it from the school. And that little sled with weights on it lived at our house for many years, where Bryce would then go down to the elementary school and sprint with that strap on him, just sprint down the field every day after practice. And even in the summer when there was no practice, he would go down 5 days a week and do it. Well, long story short, his junior year, he crushed the all-time Washington State record for the most yards run in a normal season in 11-man football, and that was about 5 years ago, and that record still stands today.
Now it is time for the 10th and final Jack of the Box Player of the Week. We took a ferry ride over to Vashon Island to meet a state record holder. Bryce Hoisington had 573 yards and 9 touchdowns on 51 carries last week in a 70-31 win over Coopville. That set the single game rushing record for 11-man football. That's 573 yards. And it was no secret he was getting the ball. Vashon's formula is very straightforward and certainly effective.
During the game, they were talking like, you guys only have one play? Because it was pretty much just give the ball to me. And we just kept running it over and over. And I mean, the guys were loving it.
From the beginning of the season, we haven't really been throwing that much, but I've been fine with that. That's my brother. And I don't really mind it. I love handing the ball off to him. It makes my job a tiny bit easier.
Just hand the ball to me. The Pirates season is over, but Hoisington is only a junior, so he'd like to break his own mark next year. In addition to that single game record, he was also just 71 yards short of 3,000 on the season. That is another state record. It's a close-knit community on Vashon and a close-knit team. The Hoisingtons share the honor with their teammates.
One of the guys on the O-line, he was set on getting me that record. A couple of them were, and that just pretty much drove me and made me want to do it more.
We call ourselves the Meat Wagon. It came from one of our assistant coaches, and a lot of seniors. You know, we had a lot of guys that have been playing together for a long time.
He wasn't the biggest guy. He got called by Nike to go up to an elite camp, so he went up there to perform. He got called by the Seattle Times to come up and take pictures with several other running backs. It was just a beautiful thing. And all he had was hunger. And so you don't have to be the biggest guy or the fastest guy or whatever. But if you're willing to exercise and work out when nobody else is working out, I'll tell you, you're bound to be successful. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
Yes, and you mentioned Jim Rohn before.
Yeah.
He always said success leaves clues.
Yes, it does.
And it does. Absolutely. It's not rocket science to just look at what are people doing that are successful and then just model that and see how you can make your own version of it.
Totally. Did I mention that I used to work for Tony Robbins too? You still kind of...
you told me about that in the beginning, but so yeah. I mean, we can talk about Tony, of course.
Yeah. Any thoughts about Tony? I tell you, you know what? Let me go back. I'll just share this. You talked about finding your passion. You don't have to be second to anybody else.
Yeah.
When I left so in the year 1999, a little bit overlap into the year 2000, I was a national field trainer, which means I gave 240 speeches in 1 year. And that was a great training ground for me to learn what to do and what not to do as a speaker. I was sitting in one of his events when he said, talking to 5,000 people in Chicago, he was talking about living your dreams. And I'm sitting there with my wife, who's 6 months pregnant, and I'm an employee. And he says to the audience, when would now be a good time to go live your dreams? And I remember that was an embedded command, as you know. So when would now be a good time? And I remember—
He loves to say that.
Oh, he does. And it penetrated me in such a way that I leaned over to my wife and I said, honey, I'm going to put in my 2-week notice. And I did. And I called my parents and said, Mom, Dad, my house in Utah is being rented out. I don't have a home to go to. Can we live in the basement of your house? They said, absolutely. I said, I'll only be there for 2 months. Well, from that point, those 2 months turned into 5 years. It was a devastating and painful time. I started to do my seminars in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and I was doing the Power to Shape Your Life seminars. Here's what I discovered. I, at that time, was speaking like Tony Robbins. I was bringing his energy to my new audiences. And there was always a part of me that felt like, TJ, you need to be yourself. And it wasn't until 5 years later, when I almost lost everything financially, Ronnie, that I lost my office space and everything else, that I was essentially decided I'm going to write a book. And I was forced into the backseat of my car. And in the backseat of my car, I wrote my first book. When that book was published a few months later, it became a national bestseller. But it was through the process of going through pain and writing If You Think You Can that TJ found his own voice, not Tony's voice. And so, although I love Tony, and that time period was a huge learning experience for me that I'll always be thankful for and grateful for, the key is you need to go out there and use those models to duplicate. That's a great thing. But then make sure you find your own voice, your own skills, your own talents as you do it. Any thoughts?
And also to admit to the pain, to really let it in, to really, and not just like suffer and like, oh my God, and I'm so poor, and oh no, and this happens. No, let it in, learn from it,
and execute.
And move on.
Totally.
Yes, execute, like take action because of that. And then, because also being vulnerable, being open about that, that's beautiful. Not just whining around and like, oh my God, I'm so poor. Oh, this happened to me, and this is my story. And now for the last 10 years, I couldn't do it because this happened to me when I was a little kid. Yes, life is what happens to us, but actually life is what we make of what happened to us. Nothing, no event in our life shapes the way that we are. Just the way that we think about the events shape the way that we are.
Ronnie, that's beautiful. You know, a person that was from Vienna was Viktor Frankl. Does that ring a bell to you? Viktor Frankl was put in a Nazi concentration camp many years ago and came out of that. And what you just said, Ronnie, is exactly what he taught. At one point in that concentration camp, by the way, Viktor Frankl, if anybody's listening to this, he wrote the international best-selling book that sold around the world and still sells in the top lists around the world, a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl found himself in his deepest despair while he was in that concentration camp. They had shaved every hair off of every part of his body. He was sitting alone, naked, in one of the cells inside the concentration camp. And it was there that he discovered what he called later the last of human freedoms. And you know what the last of human freedoms were? To choose your attitude, that it was your mindset, that no matter what physical conditions surround you, that the way out of it is how you look at it. And I love that. It's exactly what you said, Ronnie.
Also, Nelson Mandela was the same way when he was in prison for many, many, many years. That he actually, when he came out, like he was not angry. He was like, he was preparing in there.
He said that. He said, this was a time for me to prepare. Right.
Exactly. And so it's basically whatever happens to you. I mean, there are many examples. Oprah Winfrey, when you read her story as a teenager and so on, with getting raped and everything. And I mean, that was actually what she used for her drive. That was the fire to keep her pushing. Like, no, I never want to go back there again.
Yeah, she didn't buy into those painful, horrendous experiences. She said, no, I'm going to drive forward. And that takes a special mindset. And so for the audience, how do you get that mindset? Here's my suggestion, and I'd love to hear yours. You have to start getting around and associating people with the mindset you want to have. And maybe you don't know people. You know where I'd start? I would start listening to audio programs and podcasts like this, and so start filling your mind with this out-of-the-box thinking, this bigger thinking. And I'll tell you what, you will find as you fill your mind with high-performance mindset concepts that conditions will be less important to you, that where you're going becomes the focus.
Absolutely. I've signed this every day of the week, because for more than 2 decades, I've been focused on why we do what we do, why we feel what we feel, like with basically how do we work as humans. And it's fascinating. It's really brilliant, actually. And right now I'm reading a book from Napoleon Hill, but not Think and Grow Rich. I'm reading right now Outwitting the Devil, which came out just a few years ago, and where he's actually interviewing the devil, or like in a way, and where the devil, one of the things that he says is like, oh no, I get my power by people not thinking, by people being unaware or unconscious. And actually you, with this book and so on, this is like against my power, because I don't want the people to wake up. Or when you I'm sure you've seen The Matrix, the movie. Like with the red pill and the blue pill, it's basically the same thing. It's like, hey, you want to live in the Matrix, or you want to step out of it and look behind the curtain what's really going on.
Right.
And this is all about like really being here in the moment. And also there's one more thing that I want to say to that. One of the great books that I've read in my life was The Power of Now. From Eckhart Tolle.
Eckhart Tolle.
I read that back in 2003. And one thing that I remember is at this, like, I want you to get this to the listeners who are listening to us, and in whatever situation you're in right now, whatever circumstances there are, and especially right now, if it's something that is financially crushing or something that you just lost your job or whatever it is, think about this. In this very moment that you're listening to this podcast, in this very moment, what problem do you really have right now? Because usually all of your problems, all of the challenges, they are somewhere in the future, in an imagined future that is not there yet, in an imagined past that is behind you, but what is right now? If there's not somebody standing beside you while you listen to a podcast right now holding a gun to your head or something like that, there are not really many problems that you could have right now, literally. And just to be aware of that. This was for me a huge awakening.
Totally. Most of the things we worry about never come to pass anyway. So have a vision for your life, but you got to live in the present, knowing, okay, this is what I'm moving toward. This is the angle that I'm moving toward, but let's live now. Right now, I have a lot of choices. I can go this way. I can go this way. I can think this. I can go contact this person. I can ask this person for forgiveness, right? There's a myriad of things that can free you right now.
Yes. And I want to share something about this as well, because right now we're in the middle of 2020. Actually, to be honest, by the time we are recording this is halftime.
Yes.
Today we started to the second half of the year. And think about it this way, but wherever you are right now in your life, and whenever you're listening to this, there is still a second half to play.
Amen.
And just because you might be down by some points in the first half, you can say, okay, that was it. I give up, I'll leave, or I'll just wait until the time runs out. Or you can say, I'm going to choose a different approach. And here is a story that I want to share. When I met Tom Brady, I met Tom Brady in 2013. It was after a game in Houston. And it was just 1 week after, at the time, the biggest comeback that they had in New England Patriots history. There was 1 week prior that they played against Peyton Manning and the Broncos in New England. And at halftime, they were down 24-0. 24-0. And even if you're listening to this and you don't really understand American football, it's a lot. Yeah, that's quite something.
Yep.
And then they came out and they won it. They turned it around in overtime. And I asked him, like, when you walk into the locker room, being down 24-0, how do you motivate yourself? How do you get back out there believing in yourself that you still can do this, that you can still turn it around? And he said, there are 2 ways that you can look at it. First is you need to take every single play as a play by itself. Focus just on the next play, play by play, or step by step. Yeah, it's like focus on what is right in front of you. Just one step at a time. And second is also to remember the things that you already achieved in the past with your teammates, with your team, where you already overcame big challenges as a team. To believe again that you need to believe in yourself, you need to believe in the team, to believe in the people around you. And then with those two combined, you can turn it around. And I mean, boy, when you talk about this being down 24-0 at halftime, think about the Super Bowl a few years ago when they were down 28-3 with like 2.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. So it is possible.
It is possible.
And you need to believe in yourself, and you need to have 100% focus.
I love this. You basically said a phrase that we often say is flick back and flip up. So flip back to times when you were successful and when you felt like you were on top of your game and you felt totally confident. Take that emotion that's associated in that memory and pull it forward and act with that same confidence now, step by step, play by play, right? And that will begin to make a difference. People say, well, they wait for I'll do it when I feel confident. But here's a little distinction. It's like, yeah, I'll invest when I'm rich. Yeah, here's the reality with I'll do it when I feel confident. No, if you will do it, then the feelings of confidence will come. Stop waiting for something to come save you, an emotion, and go start acting, and the emotions will come that will support you.
Get yourself in the state first.
Yes.
I always tell people, because I also teach people how to speak on stage.
Yep.
And I say, look, if you want to it's all about taking your audience on an emotional journey. Mm. Like taking them from where they are to where you want to get them. And
you have to
who needs to be in this state first?
That's right. You need to be there first.
Yeah. You need to be there first. Or I was in sales at some point. When you are with the customer, who needs to be in state first?
So true. So true.
You need to be. And it does not matter whatever happened in the rest of your life at that time. It does not matter if, I don't know what is. It matters this moment. This person is right in front of you.
That's so true. Great salespeople, for example, can meet with a customer, not get the sale, feel emotionally devastated. But great salespeople will leave that, maybe go walk around the building or go shake it off, right? Yeah. And then they meet with a new customer as if they've had the greatest day in their life. It's being able to control the emotions. And the way that we're able to control those emotions is what we're focusing on at the moment.
Yes.
And the meaning we bring to that, whatever we're focused on. So anyway, we could go listen.
For example, I got anchored to that because I was in door-to-door sales for some time. And every time that I rang the doorbell, that moment the doorbell rang, I was on.
Dude, that was a trigger. Yes.
That was a trigger because that was an anchor. It was like pushing the button, and then I knew it's showtime.
That's right.
Now we're here. No, the outside world, you're out. Now it's just me and my client.
Good reminders. All right, Ronny, I think we're coming up to a good hour almost. And so let's bring this to a close. But Ronny, I know, first of all, there's a lot more we could talk about around mindset and so forth. So why don't we do this? Share with the audience how they can get in touch with you, maybe different services that you can offer them and so forth. Your story is powerful. Your concepts are powerful. You have a lot of great experiences that can lend to people and helping them unleash their greatness within. So give us a little bit of how they can reach you or whatever.
Absolutely. First of all, a few months ago, I started my own blog. So you can follow my blog at ronnyleber.com/blog, and then you just go on the English flag or the American flag up there and to have the English version, if it's not in English right away. And besides that, also you can follow me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram, on Facebook.
What's your handle? We'll put the link
Ronny
up.
Leber, always at Ronny Leber.
At Ronny Leber.
So it's just my name. It's very easy.
Yep.
And also on my homepage, besides the blog, when you sign up for the blog, you will also get a 7-step checklist on 7 steps to wow your audience. That is something, if you are speaking or if you are entertaining people, this is something to really be focused on. I'm actually coming up something right now with the art of playing with the audience, like to really. It's something I got inspired by Al Gore because Al Gore was my very first speaking inspiration.
Oh, interesting.
When I was 16, I was a campaign helper for Al Gore and Bill Clinton. When I was in high school, we had that was one of the subjects was called Election 96. And so we went to Al Gore, we went to see Bill Clinton.
This is when you were an exchange student in America.
Yes, I was an exchange student, and it was fantastic. And for me, when I saw Al Gore, I remember 4 years later when he was running for president, many people perceived him as boring.
Yeah, I sort of remember it that way. Yeah, right.
When I saw him, he was funny, he was engaging, he was really cool. I got a lot more impressed by Al Gore than by Bill Clinton, to be honest. I was like, wow. When I saw him engaging with the audience, I thought, man, I would love to be able to do that. And that was something for me that was like so cool.
Yes.
And basically, I mean, many years later, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, so yes, just reach out to me also through my homepage, ronnyleber.com. You can find me there.
Right.
Whatever
Social
you need.
media.
Yes, and if it's something like, for example, if you need to get prepared for a gig or for something, or you want to have a deeper impact with your community, I can help you with that. To have a deeper emotional impact with your audience, with your client, with your community.
Perfect. Ronny, what a great conversation. I enjoy the spirit that you bring to it. I think mindset is everything. That's the one thing ultimately that we have control over. So let me just say a warm thank you for being willing to come on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thank you for the invitation, TJ. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You bet. Make it a great one.
You too.
Podcast listeners, thanks for listening. You've taken time out of your schedule, and I really appreciate it. Now, do me a favor. If you like what you heard, star it. Thanks. Now go unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com